The sun burned hot above the slave market. Dust rose from every footstep. Shouts echoed through the open cages as buyers walked by, looking for something young, pretty, or useful. No one stopped at her cage. She sat alone, chained to the metal wall, too tall for the bars. Her knees pulled to her chest. Her silver hair was matted and dirty. Her body, wide-shouldered and muscular, didn't match the other slave girls. They were small, slim, soft. She looked like a warrior, but she was broken, too big. One merchant laughed, more beast than woman. Another spat. She never breed. Someone whispered loud enough for her to hear. She didn't lift her head. She didn't speak. Her name was Valerie. She had once belonged to the outer tribes of the Alari system. Her people valued grace and thin bodies, but Valerie's body grew too fast. Too strong, they said she was a mistake, a curse, unwanted, so they sold her. That was 2 years ago. Now she sat in the slave market of a backwater world no one wanted her here either, not until he came. Jace moved quietly through the rows of cages, a tall human man with rough clothes, a pack over his shoulder and calm eyes. He didn't look rich. He didn't look cruel either. He stopped in front of her cage and said nothing. Valari glanced up through her tangled hair. She expected another insult, or worse, a buyer with bad intentions, but the man simply looked at her. Not like a thing, not like property, just looked. "You'll hurt yourself if you keep sitting like that," he said softly. His voice wasn't mocking. It wasn't loud. It was the first kind voice she had heard in months. She blinked slowly, confused. "What do you want?" she asked. Her voice was dry, rough from silence. "To know your name," he said. She hesitated, then whispered Valari. He nodded once. "I'm Jace." A silence passed. She stared at him, trying to understand his game. Everyone had a game. Everyone wanted something. "I'm not breeding material," she said suddenly. Her voice had no emotion, only fact. "My body is too big, too rough. No male wants me, not even my kind." Jace's brow lifted. "I didn't ask you for that," he said. "I'm not here to breed you." That made her frown. "Then why are you here?" Jace looked at her again, really looked. He saw more than chains and bruises. He saw someone strong who had been taught to feel weak. He saw a fire deep inside that hadn't gone out, even if it was fading. He turned to the trader nearby. "How much?" he asked. The trader laughed. "Her. I'll give you a discount just to get her off my books." Jace tossed a few credit chips on the table. The chains clicked open. The cage door creaked. Valari didn't move. Her eyes widened. "Why?" she asked. "No one ever bought her not. For this reason, not like this, because no one should live in a cage." Jace replied. He reached a hand out. Open, calm, not a command, an offer. She looked at it for a long time. She could have run. She could have stayed. Instead, she took his hand. The crowd stared. A human, walking with a giant alien woman through the market like she was an equal. Valerie kept her head low, but inside her heart pounded. No one had ever chosen her before. Not without laughing, not without Basu. Not without Basu, no Vasu. No Vasu long-lasting color. Walk in with law-lasting color. Walk in with a mark of a loud, while law last in galley. Mil massier, malalay, my bez de plays, conzide. My sibaile, dot lesat, dot aled, by bida dot, tesse, k dot, odds as, kanakawe it lupside ika basica bigis. Conditions not without shame, but this man, this quiet human, had bought her freedom. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a mistake. She felt seen. They left the market together. 2 strangers, 1 bond, and an unknown journey ahead. The land was quiet. Far from the noise of the slave market, dusty roads turned into rocky hills. and rocky hills faded into tall green trees. Valerie followed. Jace without chains now, but her steps were heavy. She was free, yes, but confused. Why did this human want nothing from her? Why didn't he stare at her like others did? She had never been to a place like this. No guards, no watchers, no other slaves. Just trees, wind, birds, and silence. They walked until the sun was nearly gone, and just before the sky turned dark. Jace pointed. There, he said, ahead stood a small wooden hut hidden in the trees. Smoke curled gently from the chimney. A fence wrapped around a small garden, and beside it, a broken water pump that still made noise. Valerie stopped walking. "This is your home?" she asked, unsure. "It's quiet," Jace said simply. He opened the door and stepped inside. Leaving it open for her, she stood there for a moment, then stepped through, expecting something else. Orders, maybe, or rules, or conditions. But all she saw was a one-room space with a stove, 2 chairs, and a cot. He didn't even look at her as he poured water into a kettle and placed it on the heat. "You hungry?" he asked. Her stomach growled loudly before she could answer. She looked away, embarrassed. "Yes," she whispered. He pulled out a box of dry food cubes and handed some to her. "They're not fancy," he said, "but they won't kill you, Valerie." Stared at the food for a long time. She remembered being fed like an animal thrown scraps in the dirt. But this time, the food was in her hand. Given with respect, she ate slowly, carefully, her eyes watching him the entire time. Jace sat down in the old chair and stretched his arms behind his head. He didn't talk much, didn't ask her questions, didn't touch her. He just sat quietly, like she wasn't a slave or a burden, like she was just another person. Finally, she broke the silence. "You live here. Alone." He nodded. Since the war ended, she swallowed hard. "Why did you buy me?" she asked again, softer this time. "I don't understand. I'm not. You don't have to be anything." He cut in gently. "I bought you because no one else would. And you didn't deserve that cage." Valerie's throat tightened. She had spent so long being unwanted, that kindness now felt like a trick. She waited for the moment he would change, the moment he'd say, "Now pay me back." But it never came. "You can sleep there." Jace pointed to the corner where he laid down extra blankets. "I'll take the floor tonight." Valerie's eyes widened. "You? Give me the bed?" He nodded. "You've had worse days than me." She didn't argue. She didn't even undress. She curled into the blankets like a scared animal. But her body was warm, her stomach full, and her mind unsure. That night, she didn't sleep much. Her eyes stayed open, listening, watching. But Jace didn't move toward her. He didn't touch her. He just lay on the floor with one arm under his head, snoring softly, and for the first time in years. Valerie didn't feel hunted. The next morning, she rose before the sun. She found the garden tools outside, and without being asked, she started pulling weeds. She wasn't trying to repay him. She just needed to move, to do something. Jace walked out later, yawning. Rubbing his neck, he watched her quietly for a while before saying, "You don't have to work, you know." She didn't stop. "I want to," she replied. "It's peaceful." He nodded and went to fix the broken water pump. By afternoon, she had cleaned half the garden and even cooked a simple meal from the dry packs. It tasted terrible, but Jace smiled and said, "Best thing I've eaten in weeks." Valerie didn't smile back. Not yet. But inside her heart, something small and warm began to grow. That night, she sat by the fire instead of hiding in bed, and Jace handed her a hot drink. She took it with both hands, warming her fingers. Her voice came low, almost a whisper. "Thank you," she said. He looked at her and replied, "You don't owe me anything." And she believed him, maybe not fully, but just enough to take another sip and not look away. It started with a howl, a deep, bone-shaking sound that rolled through the valley like thunder. Valerie dropped the pot in her hands, and Jace's head snapped toward the door. Another howl followed closer, louder than the scream of one of the neighbor's farm beasts echoed in the night air. "Stay inside," Jace said quickly, grabbing his old plasma rifle from the wall, but Valerie was already moving. "What is it?" she asked, voice tense. "Could be a nightclaw," Jace muttered. "They hunt in pairs sometimes." He threw open the door and stepped out into the cold darkness. But Valerie didn't stay behind. She followed him into the black, her long legs silent on the dirt. He glanced back. "I told you to stay in. I'm not weak," she answered, her voice low, steady. "I don't run from monsters." Just then, a shape moved fast through the trees. Large, low, and fast eyes, glowing like dying embers. Claws scraping over stone, Jace raised his rifle. But before he could fire, the creature lunged. Valari stepped in front of him, not thinking, just acting. She grabbed a broken fence pole with both hands and swung. The wood cracked against the beast's face with a loud thump. The nightclaw rolled away, howling in pain. Another jumped from behind. But Valerie twisted and drove her shoulder into it. It hit the ground hard. Stunned, Jace fired twice, and the valley lit up with short bursts of blue light. Both monsters scrambled and disappeared into the trees. The air fell silent again, except for Valerie's heavy breathing. She stood tall, fists clenched. Dirt on her face, Jace lowered his weapon slowly. Looking at her in awe, "You saved my life," he said softly. Valari didn't speak. She looked. Down at her hands, still shaking, the pole she had used to strike the beast was splintered and useless. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. "I just moved." Jace smiled. "That's what instinct does." They walked back to the hut in silence. When they reached the door, Valerie stopped and looked at her reflection in the old metal panel beside the porch. Scratches on her arms, sweat down her neck. She looked wild, powerful, and not ugly, not today. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat beside the fire, staring into the flames. Jace sat too, fixing the broken lock on the door. After a while, he said, "You fight like someone who's never had the chance to." Valari looked at him. "I was trained to obey, not protect," she said quietly. "My people thought my strength made me useless, not worthy of family." Jace looked at her carefully. "Then they were fools," he said. "You were born to protect someone, maybe even more than one." Her eyes flicked up to his. "What do you mean?" He shrugged and smiled a little. "You'll understand one day, in the days that followed." Something shifted between them. Jace treated her the same, no demands, no orders, but Valerie now moved differently. With purpose, with confidence, she chopped wood in half the time, fixed the water pump, even started crafting sharp sticks and small traps around the edge of the land in case the nightclaws returned. One morning, while checking a trap near the hilltop, she saw two small lights in the sky, not stars, but ships. She narrowed her eyes, watching them disappear behind the mountain. Old fear gripped her for a second. Slavers, hunters. But she shook it off. She wasn't the same broken giant in a cage anymore. She was something else now. That night, while watching the fire with Jace, she said something soft but strong. "If you ever get in danger again," she said, "I won't hesitate. I'll protect you." Jace looked over, quiet, for a long second. Then he nodded and said, "I believe you." And for the first time, she smiled, not just with her lips, but with her eyes, the kind of smile that said, "I finally know who I am." The stars blinked above the quiet hill. Soft wind moved through the trees, rustling leaves like whispers. Jace sat on the log near the fire, his back straight, his face lit orange by the flames. Valerie sat across from him, arms around her knees. Watching the sparks float up into the sky, they didn't speak for a long time. Silence between them had become normal, now safe. It wasn't the silence of fear or awkwardness, it was peaceful. Like two souls, didn't need words to understand each other. But that night, the air felt heavier, like something was waiting to be said. Valari looked at him, then looked down at her hands. "Jace," she whispered. He glanced up. "Yeah?" She took a breath. "I need to tell you something." He didn't move, just waited. She hated how her voice trembled. "I was trained to obey," she began, "not to think. Not to choose, not to feel." The flames danced as she continued. "My people said my body was wrong, too large, too strong, not good for bonding." She looked into the fire like it might judge her. "They said no male would ever choose me. That I'd never have a child, never be held like a mate." Jace's jaw tightened slightly. But he didn't interrupt. "I started believing them," she said, her voice cracked, but she kept going. "I thought I was a monster with no future." Silence again. Then Jace leaned forward and said softly, "You're not a monster." She looked up, eyes wet, but not crying. "You don't know that," she said. "You haven't seen what I've done." "I've seen what you've survived," he replied. "I've seen what you've protected. How you move, how you care for everything around you, even when you think no one's watching." Valari's chest rose and fell slowly. The wind picked up and made the fire flicker. "Do you know what I see when I look at you?" Jace asked. She didn't answer, only looked at him. "I see someone who was broken by others, but didn't break," he said. "I see someone powerful. Not just in body, but in heart." No one had ever said that to her, not even close. She looked down again, her voice almost gone. "Why do you say those things to me?" "Because they're true," he said, "and because I care about you." Her eyes snapped up, shocked. "You care?" He nodded once, slow and calm. "I do." Valari didn't know what to do with that. No one had ever cared without wanting something in return. No one had ever held her with words. "I'm not soft," she whispered. "I'm not gentle. I don't need gentle," he said. "I need real." She blinked fast, then looked away, hiding the rush of heat in her face. "I don't know how to be anything else," she whispered. "Then just be that," he said. "Be yourself." They sat like that for a while longer. Stars moved slowly across the night sky. The fire settled into glowing coals. Then Valari shifted closer, just a little. Jace didn't move, but his eyes softened. She reached out slowly and placed her hand over his, rough skin on rough skin. And yet, somehow, it felt like peace. "I've never been this close to someone without fear," she said. "Then maybe it's time you start learning what closeness feels like," he replied. A warm silence filled the space between them. Not loud, not fast, just real. Then Jace stood and pulled the blanket from the chair behind him. He draped it over her shoulders. She froze. No one had ever done that for her. He smiled slightly. "Good night, Valari." She held the blanket tight and whispered back, "Good night." Jace, after he went inside, she sat by the fire alone, but she wasn't lonely. For the first time in her life, she felt something new, something dangerous, hope. And she wasn't sure if she should fear it or welcome it. But one thing she knew. For sure, the human had touched something deep inside her, and it wasn't just her hand he held, it was her heart. Valari stood at the edge of the small garden. Morning sun kissed her face. But she didn't feel its warmth. Her hands rested on her stomach, unmoving. It wasn't just hunger or tiredness anymore. It was something deeper, something strange. She had felt it for days now, a flutter deep inside her. Like something was growing, something alive. She had been quiet since that night by the fire, since Jace had said he cared, since she let herself believe, for one small moment, that she might be more than just a tool, but now her body was changing. Again, and it terrified her. She returned to the cabin slowly, her steps heavier than usual. Jace was cooking breakfast over the small stove. He glanced up and smiled as always. But Valerie didn't smile back. "You all right?" he asked, handing her a mug of hot root drink. She took it, held it in both hands, and sat down without speaking. He waited patiently, knowing her silences were never empty. Finally, she whispered, "Something's wrong with me." Jace's brow furrowed. "How do you mean?" She hesitated, then placed one hand gently over her lower belly. "It's changing my body," she said. Faster heartbeat, heat at night, sickness in the morning. Jace stared, the silence between them growing. Sharp, his eyes moved from her face to her hand, and then back to her eyes. "You think you're—" he began, then stopped. She nodded slowly. "I didn't think it was possible," she whispered. "My people always said I couldn't carry life, that I wasn't built for it." Jace set down his mug. "You might be pregnant," he said gently. Valerie nodded again, her jaw clenched tight. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. Her voice was small, as if afraid the answer might destroy her. "I don't know if it's safe, if it will live, if I'll hurt it." "If you'll send me away, stop," Jace said firmly. But not unkind. She looked up, startled. "You're not alone in this," he said. "You won't face this alone." Valerie's throat tightened. "But I don't know how to be a mother," she said, her voice cracked. "I was never taught love, only obedience." Jace reached across the table and gently placed his hand over hers. "You're already doing better than most," he said. "You care. That's the first and most important thing." Valerie blinked fast, fighting back tears, her hand turned in his, and their fingers locked without words. In that small, quiet cabin in the hills, something sacred passed between them. Not desire, not fear, but something deeper: trust. The days that followed moved slower, softer. Valerie no longer hid her body. She began to rest more, eat more. Jace started sketching out a new room beside the hut, a nursery, he said with a smile. They didn't speak of the world outside. They didn't need to. All that mattered was growing inside her. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Jace found her sitting in the garden again. She was staring at the plants but not really seeing them. He crouched beside her. "What are you thinking?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Then finally, she whispered, "I never thought I'd matter this much to anyone." "You matter to me," he replied. "And to the life we've created." She looked down at her stomach, then at him. "Do you really think it will survive?" "I think it's stronger than either of us," he said with a grin, "especially if it's anything like its mother." Valerie laughed, softly, really laughed. It was the first time Jace had heard that sound from her, like music through rusted iron, hope cracking open the chains of the past. That night, they sat outside again, beneath the stars. She leaned against him. His arm wrapped gently around her. No words were needed. The silence between them was full of warmth, of future, of family, and as she rested her head against his shoulder, a single tear slid down her cheek. Not from fear, not from sadness, but from something she never thought she'd feel again. Joy. The sky was quiet again. No clouds, no wind, just stillness to still. Jace stood on the porch with a hammer in hand. He was building a wooden crib from old planks. Every nail he drove in carried hope, a future, but Valerie stood behind him, staring toward the sky with a hard look in her eyes. "They're coming," she said. Jace stopped mid-swing. He turned slowly. "Who?" She pointed at the distant black shape in the clouds. A small ship, low and circling. "Too quiet, too slow slavers," she said. "Or bounty hunters." Jace's jaw tightened. "I thought they forgot about you." Valerie shook her head. "They never forget a sail they lost." The ship passed once more. then vanished behind the hill. Jace grabbed his rifle and checked the charge level. Wari stepped inside the hut and reached under the floorboards. She pulled out a blade-along, curved weapon with markings from her homeworld. "I hoped I'd never use this again," she whispered. Jace looked at her and said, "I hoped you'd never have to." As night fell, they didn't sleep. They sat by the fire with their backs to each other, watching both sides of the tree line. The wind shifted, and then came the sound. Boots, heavy and slow, crushing dry leaves. Jace aimed his rifle toward the sound. Valerie stepped out into the moonlight, holding her blade. And then the slavers appeared, 4 of them, armored, masked, and armed. One of them spoke, his voice cold. "That female belongs to us," he said. "She was stolen property. She belongs to no one," Jace said, stepping forward. "She's free." The slaver laughed. "She's valuable now," he hissed, "especially with a hybrid child growing in her." Valerie's eyes turned sharp. Her grip on the blade tightened. She had feared many things in life, but not anymore. "I am not your product," she said through gritted teeth. "I am not your slave." Without warning, one of the slavers fired. The shot missed, but the message was clear. This wasn't a negotiation. Jace fired back, hitting one in the leg. The man screamed and fell. Valerie moved like lightning. Her blade flashed silver in the firelight as she charged. One slaver swung a shock stick. She caught it midair and snapped it in half. Another raised a stun rifle. Jace shot it out of his hands from behind. Then it was quiet again. 3 men down, 1 left crawling. The leader raised both hands slowly. "You don't understand," he gasped. "She's property." Valerie stepped closer, eyes burning. "No," she growled. "I am mother now." And with one clean move, she threw her blade into the ground near his foot. A warning, not a kill. "Leave and tell the rest," she said. "Come again, and I will end you." The man scrambled to his ship, dragging his wounded team. The engines roared, and the sky turned red as the ship vanished over the horizon. Gone, Jace lowered his rifle, breathing hard. He turned to Valar, who was gripping her belly, eyes shut tight. "Are you hurt?" He rushed to her. "No," she said, her voice shaking. "But the child." It moved. He placed a hand gently on her stomach and felt it too. A soft shift. A tiny kick. Life, hope, their child. "You protected all of us," Jace whispered. Valerie leaned into his chest. "I never thought I'd be someone worth protecting," she said softly. "You're more than worth it," he replied. "You're everything." The fire behind them still burned. The wind still moved through the trees. But now this land was theirs. Not just a place to hide, but a place to live. And the woman once called too big, the woman mocked, sold, and chained, now stood as protector, as mother, as free. She looked up at the stars and smiled, not because the danger was over, but because she had something worth fighting for now, and she would never go back to the cage, not ever again. Rain fell gently on the rooftop, not heavy or cold, just soft and steady, like a lullaby from the sky. Inside the small wooden cabin, the fire crackled. Warm light filled the room, wrapping everything in peace. Jace sat beside Valar, holding her hand. Her breathing was deep, slow, steady in her arms. She held something small, wrapped in a blanket made from their old clothes. A soft cry broke the silence thin. Hai knew the sound of life. Their child had arrived, a little girl, half human, a Filari, tiny but strong, eyes like stars, skin. With a shimmer of both their worlds, Valerie looked down at her daughter. Tears welled in her eyes, not from pain, but from something far bigger. Something she never thought she would feel belonging. "She's perfect," Jace whispered, voice shaking. Valar nodded slowly. "She's small," she said, her voice barely a breath, "but she's strong." Jace kissed Valari's temple and smiled, just like her mother, outside. The storm passed, and the moon peeked through the clouds. The cabin glowed under its silver light, and inside, 3 souls rested together, one family, no more chains, no more cages. No more running in the following days. Life moved slow. Valerie no longer worked like a soldier. She rocked her child. In her arms, hummed old lullabies she thought she had forgotten. She smiled more now, laughed more. Even Jace noticed she had begun to walk differently. Lighter, freer. The villagers down the hill who once feared her now nodded with respect. Some came, too. Offer blankets, some brought food. Most just wanted to see the child, the rare hybrid born of strength and peace. No one dared call Valari a mistake now. She had become something greater than her past. A protector, a mother, a symbol of hope. One evening, Jace stepped out into the garden and found her sitting with the child under the stars. The baby slept in her lap. Valerie was looking up at the sky, eyes distant. "You thinking of going back?" Jace asked gently. She shook her head slowly. "No," she said. "I used to wonder if my people would accept me now. But I don't need them anymore." Jace sat beside her. "This is your home now," he said. "It always has been," she replied. Placing her hand over his, they sat in silence, watching the stars blink. Their daughter shifted slightly and made a soft cooing sound. Valerie smiled and whispered, "She has your quiet spirit." "And your fire," Jace added. They leaned close, heads touching. No fear, no shame, only warmth. A new life had begun, not just for their daughter, but for them too. The woman who once believed she was not breeding material, who thought she was too big to be loved, was now the center of a family. The reason a cabin stayed warm. The reason a man smiled every day. And as Jace wrapped his arm around her, he whispered something he had never said out loud before. "I love you, Valari." She closed her eyes, holding the words like treasure, and whispered back, "I love you too, human." The next morning, a new sun rose. Birds sang in the trees, and the valley woke with life. Inside the cabin, a child opened her eyes for the first time to the golden light. Her tiny hand reached out and grabbed her mother's finger. Strong grip, steady hold. Valari laughed softly. "She's going to be a warrior," Jace chuckled. "With a heart as big as yours." They stood together at the doorway. A family born not from perfection, but from choice, from courage. From the simple act of one man who saw beyond what others refused to see. She had been told she was worthless. He proved she was everything, and now, in the quiet hills far from war and slavery, 3 hearts beat as one, a mother, a father, and the little girl whose future would be written in freedom, not fear. Their story was not loud, but it was powerful. Because real love needs no armor, just honesty, and the will to stand beside someone who once stood alone.